Thank you, Malini. I'd like to say a big thank you to Malini Mehra for everything that you've done with us this year so far with the British Chamber. I think what I'd like to say as an introduction to the British Chamber of Commerce is that I think like a lot of people in the room, most people were not very clued up on climate change and COP this time last year, let's say that. No exception for myself. I first met Malini in January this year. We had a session in London with the COP29 Chief Operating Officer, and that went really, really well. We've again got to know Malini and other members of London Climate Action. And it was a very, very, very sort of successful time. We've run through things. Last month, just prior to Formula One, we did as the British Chamber of Commerce a sustainability event, a climate innovation event, which was great. Well, now here we are, so thank you very much for asking me to moderate this. You'll all be very pleased to know that I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not an expert in any way, shape or form in climate or any other thing, but at least I now know what Article 6 is. That's taken me 9 months, so there we go. If you don't know what Article 6 is, ask Marie, she'll tell you. So I would like to just start with a video which we're going to play from Mr. Manjun, who is a Chinese academic, very good friend of Malini's. He's the founding director of the Institute of Public Environmental Affairs from Beijing in China. Try and follow the slides. The slides go very, very quickly, but please listen to what he's saying. That's I think for me is the next bit, and then I'll introduce the panel following that. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to the Baku Climate Week. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share with you all the efforts made in China to help small and medium-sized companies to decarbonize. Extreme weather events have become more frequent globally, and the first global stock pick revealed the enormous gap to close. Big multinationals and financial institutions are committed to net zero, but the SMEs facing a huge challenge, and they are part of the global supply chain and they're in scope 3. We believe that China's pollution control actions over the past 1 decade have actually offered some experiences to hasten the process. And all of this effort was started from a massive monitoring and disclosure, which allows our Blue Map database to track the performance of some 16 million corporations operating in China. And on the climate side, we believe we need to start from the construction of the carbon data infrastructure. We build a national data infrastructure and really down to the provinces and cities, also help the agencies to implement the mandatory disclosure requirements, compile the corporate emission data, and then make them more accessible. And also, we're happy to see a whole series of new disclosure rules with ISP, but they're focused more on the listed companies, the big companies. But I'm happy to report, as IPE, we have been invited to help develop general guidelines for corporate carbon disclosure that needs to guide the disclosure of the small and medium-sized companies. And with the data become more available, we can conduct a performance review based on this data. And during the past 6-7 years, we work on the corporate climate action index, assess the performance of the supply chain climate action of major global and local brands from different industries, and also highlight not just what the companies, the brands have committed, but how much they actually deliver, particularly on their scope 3, the supply chain decarbonization side. But I think one of the most the most important is to create digital solutions because SMEs are facing the capacity gaps and relatively high cost. And to help overcome that, we work with our partners to develop the digital carbon calculators, which have been quite extensively used by major global brands and also brands from the Greater China regions. And they incorporate the use of our data into their sourcing standards and have motivated nearly 30,000 suppliers to disclose and enhance their performance. In the past 4 years, we also held major events to check the performance of some 3 million companies as part of the green banking due diligence. And we're happy to see that increasingly the banks also wanted to tap into the cost-effective tools to help measure those who want to borrow money. SBTI is a powerful tool, but the implementation is challenging, particularly for SMEs. So we develop digital tools to help them set targets. And on the corporate, besides the corporate carbon emission disclosure, we also work to help the small and medium-sized companies to on the product carbon footprint disclosure. And we developed the emission factors database and the disclosure platform, which compiles more than 28,000 different products, including those raw materials and components from upstream, and develop applications to help our app users to take a picture and get embedded carbon of different products. Last but not least, China has also imposed the red line zones and functioning zones mechanism, and we help to put all this on the digital map. So tens of thousands of different zones have been put on the map, and so this can help with the water resource and biodiversity conservation due diligence in investment and supply chain management. We believe it can help to lower the transaction cost for not just the big companies, but also SMEs. Very happy to have the chance to brief you about what's going on in China, and I look forward to further communications and collaborations with you in Baku. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'd just like to now introduce our panel. I got these glasses, these are brand new. I think I know, probably I know all of you in this room, but believe me, I've forgotten, because I'm just getting old. And so are my eyes, so now I can't see any of you, I can see this, so my apologies for this. However, I'd like to introduce, first of all, Dr. Anna Schulenberg, guest lecturer at the FHNW University of Applied Sciences and Arts from Northwestern Switzerland School of Business, Peru. Please welcome Dr. Anna. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard Alley, who's the Director of Corporate Affairs Strategy, the Stakeholder Relations from Tetra Pak. Welcome, Richard. And Mr. Elmot Elliott, Advisor to Chairman of the Board of COBIA, which is the Small and Medium Business Development Agency of Azerbaijan. Welcome, Elmot. Thank you very much. Take these off now. A nice big gap between us, but there we go. Knew my deodorant wasn't working very well this morning, but never mind. We have an order of people's stats, but I'm going to just change that order slightly, because I feel that from listening to the video that we start on maybe a slightly more academic level. So I'd just like to ask Dr. Anna Schulenberg just to introduce yourself. what is it you actually do, and what are your big take from the videos you just saw from Mr. Marshall?
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone in the room for having me. I'm very honoured to be in Baku ahead of COP29. I am an expert on carbon removal. I'm originally a scientist, but worked my entire career in business, and my passion has always been to connect the world of science and technology to business. And this is also why I'm now taking this role in carbon removal. I'm aware not everybody in the room may have heard of carbon removal, so maybe let's quickly do an introduction to carbon removal in 2 minutes. I'll do my best. Since Paris, we have all heard about net zero, right? And the zero, I think, is clear to everyone, right? What zero means. But the net often is not clear to people. So we know that we need to reduce our emissions, and that's renewable energy, that's electrification of transport, and so on and so forth. But there are some activities that are really, really difficult to stop doing or to decarbonize. If I travel, I live in Switzerland, when I travel to my family in London, I take the train. It's more expensive, but that's what I do for the climate. Now coming here, I had to fly. I couldn't take a train, I couldn't drive, right? And this is what's typically called unavoidable emissions. So these are emissions that you cannot avoid. At the moment and in the foreseeable future, we cannot really fly without capturing CO2 from the air. So every time you fly, the airplane emits CO2 directly into the atmosphere, and we somehow have to take it back out of the atmosphere in order to get to net zero. So it's the effect of taking it out in order to get to a net zero. So that's my expertise. I've worked with a lot of the leaders in this field in the past, but what really is my passion is to enable businesses to act on that net aspect of it. And how Marjol already explained, there's a lot of pressure on companies to report. And especially for SMEs, that's actually often a lot of work and a lot of cost, and simply stressing their already limited resources. What for me is special about carbon removal is that it isn't only a threat to the business, but often also an opportunity. If you look at taking CO2 out of the air, you also need to store it somewhere. And typically today, that CO2 is either stored in soils, so agricultural soils, or in geological formations such as oil and gas fields. So if you look at the transition, and as an SME, you kind of start thinking about what will my business look like in 5 to 10 years? What skills do I need to build today to get there? Actually, if you are involved in geology or in chemical processing of gases or laying pipelines, you already have a lot of the skills to move into carbon removal. So it's not just looking at the penal aspect of you have to report, you have to pay, do this and that, but also to look at the opportunities that this transition opens up for you, particularly as a small and medium-sized businesses. And maybe to finish, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, and we discussed this earlier, a lot of the regulation, it might not directly apply to you, but large companies will pass it on to you, right? So for small and medium-sized businesses, they don't necessarily have the regulatory risk in the strictest sense of the word, but their license to operate depends on their carbon footprint. And this is what we see, and I'm just going to mention one example, which is Walmart, one of the big conglomerates, huge company, right? And they see their biggest lever in their supply chain. Their supply chain are SMEs, right? And they have a project called Project Gigaton, where they are aiming that their suppliers will reduce and remove 1 gigaton, so 1/40th of today's emissions, in order to be able to trade with Walmart. So for SMEs is the license to operate that's at stake. So I'm really excited that, as the Minister earlier said, there is a project to reskill and transfer these skills so that SMEs continue being able to do business. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Dr. Anne. That's very, very interesting, the bit about Walmart. I think I'll just lead in with this now. We have Richard Alley, Director of Corporate Affairs with Tetra Pak. I think it's safe to say, Richard, that Tetra Pak is not exactly a small or medium-sized enterprise. So you must have your own giga, whatever it is, of your own, perhaps?
There we go. Good morning, everyone, and great to be here again today. John, you're exactly right. We heard earlier that the World Bank estimates that 90% of businesses across the world are small and medium-sized enterprises. Tetra Pak is not one of those small and medium-sized enterprises. We're an advanced manufacturer. We produce processing equipment for the food industry, and we produce packaging for the food industry. And many of you will have seen Tetra Paks when you buy juice or indeed milk. But, and here's another number for you, which perhaps puts into great perspective the importance of small and medium-sized companies in the food industry. So the European Union, 99% of European food and drink manufacturers are small and medium-sized enterprises. They employ 28 million people, and there are 290,000 of them. Why is that important to Tetra Pak? And indeed, globally, you can look at the same sort of numbers in food and drink. The reason it's important is Tetra Pak provides an infrastructure for those entrepreneurs who are ingenious, who work within their local communities, whether that's in Southern Africa, whether that's in India, whether that's in the Americas, or indeed in Europe, or indeed here in Azerbaijan. Because what we do is we connect farmers through this processing system to consumers. And that is where you get small and medium-sized businesses who use their ingenuity, who use their creativity to provide products that consumers wish to buy. I can tell you, no consumer buys what Tetra Pak makes in terms of processing its big steel machinery. They buy what's produced inside it. That's why we're an infrastructure, and we believe we are absolutely central to how we get food systems to transform, to be more sustainable. Yesterday, I think you heard that a third of global greenhouse gas emissions originate from agriculture and the food system, and a third of food is either lost or wasted. So we provide solutions to reduce that waste, to improve that efficiency, which also has positive benefits on things like biodiversity. So if I give you an example of how we directly get involved with small and medium-sized enterprises, and actually where we also make a difference to that gender balance, which I know is something extraordinarily important to our UN high-level representative. So, dairy nuts. We provide processing and packaging to the dairy industry. What the dairy industry, of course, needs, it needs the raw supply of its milk to come from smallholder farmers in many parts of the world. And just to say, there is a growing body of research which says, if you invest in processing, there is a reverse multiplier effect that promotes small businesses, and also a forward multiplier effect that provides sustainable, nutritious, accessible and affordable food, which I think is equally important in how we achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But our dairy hubs, we provide the expertise, the extension systems to train farmers, and some of this is not telling farmers what to do, it's training trainers to go in and speak to farmers who are smallholders about how they can improve their systems, how they can improve their yields from their cattle, which obviously means they get a bigger slice of income coming in. And one other thing which is really, really crucial, it's my last point, John. On the gender point, there's also lots of research which shows a lot of looking after cattle across emerging communities is done by women. And by generating more income back to women, more of that income, and this is where we males should hold our heads in shame, women put more of their income into children and creating education. So what we have here is a virtuous cycle. It's not just about producing milk, it's about producing a sustainable outcome, both socially, environmentally, and economically.
Lovely, thank you very much, Richard. I think I have to take issue with you over that last comment there about women putting all of their money into their children, because trust me, I've got all my bloody money into my children. I'm completely bankrupt now. But it doesn't stop me. We've got two daughters, what to do. So I'd just like to now bring in Elnor Aliyah, the advisor to the chairman of COBIA, or Carmela, who was here on the previous panel. Elnor and I, we had a conversation a couple of months ago about green skills. We were trying to promote a course there using one of the UK universities, Imperial College. And Elnor made the point very much about Azerbaijan specifically, that most SMEs in Azerbaijan are based around agriculture. I'd just like to explain the situation with Azerbaijan and SMEs in particular.
Thank you very much. I believe in the first place we have to explain why we are talking about SMEs in terms of climate change and climate finance. I think the reason is very simple, because SMEs are just 50% of the problem. So according to global statistics, global damage to the environment, pollution, is caused by SMEs as much as by the large companies and the corporates. But regardless of this, and when we took up the co-presidency as a country, our agency, we have started looking at the COP process from the SMEs point of view. And what we have realized that SMEs haven't been given proper attention, at least reflecting their share in the global pollution of the climate change. What we have seen looking back at the all 28 COPs, that there was marginal, first of all, SMEs have been marginalized in terms of the discussion itself, and they have been approached according to the preferences of specific presidency. And sometimes it was regional, sometimes it was country-based, but nevertheless, what is clear that SMEs have never been an important permanent agenda item in the COP discussion. Then we started working ourselves on the SME COP. And since we are SME specialized agency, and as our chairman has been explaining, we have an already nice established infrastructure. We have conducted small research among our constituencies, SMEs, regarding the climate change, climate financing, pollution in general. And what we have realized that across different sectors of the economy, including the agriculture, the problems SMEs are facing when it comes to the climate change can be divided into three categories. The first group, the first issue that they are facing is basically awareness and knowledge. What we have realized, many SMEs also they are causing significant damage to the environment. They are not aware of this. They're not aware that they're misusing water resources, for example. They're not aware how they're polluting the soil, causing desalination. And that's across all industries. And then the second major issue that we have also realized when it comes to SMEs, that even they sometimes they know that they're polluting, they don't have resources, they don't have capabilities to tackle the issue, they don't have human resources, to explore what's going on. And even if that one is in place, the biggest challenge they face definitely is the climate financing. And when it comes to SMEs, overall impression that we have an agency looking back at the history of this climate financing discussions, in Azerbaijan we have a saying that can be translated as if they are feeling themselves like poor relatives in a rich wedding. Why I'm saying this? Because when you look at the climate discussion, you can hear big amounts, huge amounts for SMEs, and sometimes that the problems that their problems can be solved is a tiny portion of this amount. For example, you mentioned agriculture. We talk about climate financing. Even a person like talking to people, even asking what is climate financing. And what I have heard there are many scientists and very well-educated people, but when it comes to this business, you have to give them practical solution and the practical answer. What is climate financing? For example, in the agricultural sector, in Azerbaijan, many farmers are the SMEs. And major issue for us, which is cross-cutting issue, is the scarcity of the water resources. And the many irrigation system that the farmers are using, this is old style irrigation. They're just using the water flow as it flows. And we're explaining that, if you use modern technology, modern irrigation technology, you can easily save 80% of the water. And imagine at the scale of efficiency at the country level. I was explaining them and the climate financing. When you buy this technology, incorporate it into their business model, that becomes climate financing from the financier point of view. But the question is, why is not happening? And this is the major question. This is not happening, and when it comes to SMEs, their business model is quite simple, straightforward. There's not complicated cost items, there's not complicated revenues. And this doesn't happen because they cannot afford to incorporate capex related to the new technology into their business model. And the next question is why they cannot afford? Because they cannot afford amortization of 10-15 years. Very simple. So now what we are having as an agency, now we are discussing with our, unlike large companies, SMEs, they are navigating in a very complex ecosystem. And they are a tiny part of this ecosystem. Unlike large companies, sometimes large companies, they make up the ecosystem. They have their own banks, their own insurance companies, so they're an important part of the ecosystem. But in our case, in the cities, they're somehow on the margins of the bigger ecosystem. So we're talking to different country parties on the ecosystem, and what we are realizing, specifically financial institutions, they complain about financial literacy of SMEs. Then what we have also understood. We have to put on the table the new term, SME literacy. This is the main challenge because most of the players within the ecosystem, they lack SME literacy, at least from the point of the damage they're causing to the environment. This is the major challenge. So we basically, from our homework, we have been busy with this in the last 8-9 months. And then we have decided that we have been talking with our international partners as well. Then we have realized basically there is a need for global effort. And the problems with SMEs, why they are not addressed properly, there are two reasons. First of all, individually, they are too small. And the second thing, there are millions of them. And these two major reasons why they have been overshadowed by the discussion around the big companies. So we have drafted a document, and we called it Global Coalition for SMEs Green Transition. And the logic behind is, if we serious about the climate change, and if we're serious about our efforts about the climate change, we cannot ignore 50% of the problem, which is damage caused by the SMEs. So we have drafted a document, we call it Baku Declaration. We have officially introduced it to the co-presidents in September the 9th. And after that, we had a small roadshow. We went to New York, we talked about international organizations in Geneva, including ITC, and we got very good positive feedback. And many of them are saying, it is needed, because it's not addressed on the global level, the mere number of SMEs. And unlike, there's another difference between SMEs and the big companies. Unlike big companies, SMEs are not that much standardized as the large companies, because large companies, they conduct audits, they have corporate governance, they strive for ESG rating. So big companies across the globe you can compare. You can prescribe one medicine for all. But even in the small Azerbaijan, I can tell you SMEs are quite different from region to region. So what we have even realized that being SME specialized agency, we don't have resources, both human and financial, to deal with the SMEs green transition properly. And that revelation brought us to the idea that there should be specialized centers, what we call SME green transition centers, and they were well established one, which will specialize in this, and which will be basically which will be diagnosing the SME issues from the climate change point of view, climate finance point of view, and then they will try to tap into the international experience, into the international pool of financing, to see how the revenue can be provided. So this whole idea is reflected in our declaration that we are at the moment consulting with our international partners. As I said, the preamble part is in both international declaration. There is a operational part of the declaration. In the preamble, we are emphasizing the importance of SMEs. And another important feature about SMEs represent the majority of the global economy. And I personally believe that all this discussion about climate change shall be targeting a destination where protecting the culture becomes part of protecting the environment becomes part of the culture. If it's not cultural phenomenon, whatever regulation, incentives we can think of, it will not be that much effective. It shall be just simple part of the culture. You have to switch off the lights when you don't use the room. And that's the destination. So that's why I was saying, because SMEs are representing the majority of the global population, so dealing with SMEs indirectly, we are also dealing with majority of the global population, so we're contributing to the prosperity of this culture. So just to summarize, so we have this declaration. We believe it is timely, it is needed, and I believe to reflect them. It's not just a declaration, there's a solution, there's a soft solution, there's an institutional solution. Soft solution tries to address the three challenges: lack of awareness, lack of resources, lack of access to climate financing. And institutional solution that we envisage is setting up these green resource centers across the world and making up the network. So they will provide local issues, they will analyze local challenges, local issues, but they will benefit from the global experience. And this way, I hope finally we can arrive at a stage we can discuss global SME climate financing, because that will provide transparency, provide institutional readiness. Thank you. Sorry for seeing I over. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's an excellent summary, I think, of SMEs. In the UK, 95% of our tax revenues come from SMEs. And we apparently are the 6th largest economy in the world. It always shocks me, that particular thing, because I think in the UK no one actually thinks we could possibly be the 6th largest economy in the world, but we are. Richard, just with your suppliers, what's going to happen to those suppliers if they don't adhere to the transition?
I mean, excuse me. I mean, I guess there's a couple of points there, John. Firstly, as Anna said, one of the challenges that SMEs have is reporting, because that comes down to having the access. And I think the very first video we had showed that China is on that. So there is the data question of how you can do it using fewer human resources and actually use that information to deliver business improvement. I think all businesses are going to be in the same place, actually. It doesn't matter whether you're large or whether you're small. Sustainability is not a fashion. It is not going away. We actually have to double down on our efforts. And I think, absolutely the point is here, we need to support businesses of whatever size to make those changes. It doesn't mean everybody is going to make the changes, and dinosaurs are going to disappear. It doesn't matter what size they are, dinosaurs are going to disappear. So we need all together to work out what we are and how we are going to deliver it. I think the big thing on the agricultural side of things is how we deliver the knowledge into smallholder farmers, how we also deliver the technology, the capital into smallholder farmers. Personally, and this is a purely personal opinion, I think there is more to do in developing cooperative models, especially in terms of reducing the amount of food loss caused by poor storage of crops that get harvested, but then basically there's poor storage, you get vermin, you get bad weather, etc. If we can get into that point using cooperatives and extension services to support the development of those smallholder farmers, you can then see how that moves across the food chain and really pushing food system transformation.
Lovely, thank you. And Anna, sorry, just a bit of do you want to comment on that? Or?
Yes, very much so. So I'm actually here as part of my role teaching about sustainable business models to SMEs at the faculty of Northwest, where we have exactly what you pointed out so clearly, the same in Switzerland. The knowledge simply isn't there. And actually, one of the biggest hindrances to driving the transition, certainly in my field, is that lack of skills and that lack of transitioning skills. So I think it's very interesting what you say, what corporates have, the corporate role in educating their supply chain. But I also, sorry, thought it was really interesting what I see certainly in Switzerland. And I'm originally German, so I'm very EU, big country, big organizations. But what I see in Switzerland as a small to medium-sized country, maybe similar to Azerbaijan, they are much more practical and actually looking, what's the problem we're trying to solve? How can we get this onto the ground? How do we actually talk directly to the stakeholders? The way from the regulator to the stakeholder is much shorter, and that is actually a huge, huge advantage, both in knowledge transfer, in financial transfers, but then also in return, the due diligence and how to check that money has been used correctly. And then again, also connecting to corporate. So I'm really impressed of what's going on here in Switzerland. We're trying to do something very similar with these teaching courses on sustainable business models.
Lovely, thank you. And finally, Eleanor, very quickly, because this is actually the most important panel of the entire day, because when we're finished, it's lunchtime. So, the document and the roadshow Where do you find that document? Where is it? Where can, as we know, the SME go to find the document?
You see, the problem with SMEs, unlike, I was comparing large companies to SMEs because I think this is the main reason we are not at the table. There are two issues. First of all, they cannot solve their own issues, unlike the large companies. Large companies, they have resources, they have capabilities, they have definitely knowledge, and they have access to finance. This poor SME, they don't have access to regular financing, let alone climate financing. So I believe the solution lies in uniting in explaining that it's an ecosystem, that those guys are important, in uniting the effort of those players within the ecosystem, financial institutions, regulators, government agencies, everybody else. And interesting, and also this I have witnessed in many conferences, people are discussing new technologies, microgen issues, but SMEs need even those old technologies, which has been available in the last 10 years, they cannot afford them. Many of them. It's like, if you compare it with the same wedding, the stuff that we have at the table, they cannot afford this, let alone what they're cooking in the kitchen, new. Just let us enable them to benefit what's already on the table. And that will give a huge change, believe me, because of the cumulative scale of this. So, when it comes to declaration, it's still at the draft stage, we can share. Once it's finalized, we'll set a website, we'll post it on the website, so everybody will have access and everybody will have a chance to join it and support us. And we call it broad coalition because we are calling it because of the nature of the SMEs. We would like to have governments and non-governments, academia, businesses, agencies, chamber of commerce, everybody coming together and what we call coalition. That's what we call coalition. Thank you.
So, thank you very much to our panelists. Just before I finish, I just want to know who the hell gave you that photograph of me. I want to find out. And secondly, I just want to know from Emil, on the previous panel, you said that you're the one that's always leaving the government to set up your own small businesses again. But having listened to what you said about governments, are you sure it's not the other way around and they just kick you out all the time and then they have to bring you back? Is that what it is? Okay. So, thank you very much to Richard Alice, Dr. Alan Schulberg, and...
Excuse me, Mr. John. I have a question. Sorry, I have a question. Thank you for having me. I am Richard Hasanov. I'm an economist. I have a question about the transition finance. I want to continue in Azerbaijan, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. Ben çok təəssüf edirəm ki, bundan əvvəlki paneldə sual üçün şərait yaradılmadı. Elnur müəllim, sualım sizə ünvanlanır. Mən hər kəsdən üzr istəyirəm, vaxt bitibdir. Sadəcə məsələ əhəmiyyətli olduğu üçün gündəmə gətirmək istədim. Deməli, siz və eyni zamanda Orxan müəllim bildirdiniz ki, 3 əsas problem vardır. Yəni, yaşıl transformasiya prosesində və onlardan ən vacibdə təbii ki, maliyyə açıqlandığı məsələsidir. Və eyni zamanda digər tərəfdən biz bilirik ki, Mərkəzi Bank strateji və deyək dayanıqlı maliyyə alətlərinin formalaşdırılmış strategiyası çərçivəsində yaşıl məhsulların yaradılması ilə bağlı bir plan üzərində işləyir. Və burada təbii ki, hazırki mərhələdə bizdə olan məlumata görə taksonomiya sənədinin hazırlanması gedir. Birinci sualım ondan ibarətdir ki, siz qobiya olaraq maliyyə açıqlanlığının artırılması ilə bağlı hər hansı bir, deyək ki, məhsulların yaradılması istiqamətində, yəni kobiyanın səlahiyyətləri çərçivəsində planlar hazırlayırsınızmı? İkincisi, bu taksonomiya sənədi təbii ki, son nəticədə yaşıl məhsulların ölçülməsi və eyni zamanda bankların bu istiqamətdə öz, deyək ki, kriteriyalarını müəyyənləşdirməsi, məhsulların təqdim etməsinə gətirib çıxaracaqdır. Sizcə, mikro və kiçik sahibkarlıq subyektləri ölçmə meyarlarında orta və iri sahibkarlıq subyektlərindən fərqləndirilməlidirmi? Çünki indiki mərhələdə məlumatlı olduğum qədər burada fərqləndirmə yoxdur və əgər biz iri orta sahibkarlara qoyduğumuz meyarları məhz kiçik mikro sahibkarlara da təqdim edəriksə, bildiyimiz kimi son nəticədə bu özü də yaşıl maliyyə məhsullarının da əlçatanlığını aşağı salacaq. Təşəkkür. Bir də, yəni əgər gələcəkdə hər hansı bir modul, sizin səhifədə modul hazırlanması daha yaxşı olaraq təşvik üçün bildirirəm ki, kiçik mikro sahibkarlar öz, deyək ki, biznes planlarını, parametrlərini bu modula daxil etməklə nə qədər onun, deyək ki, biznes planının yaşıl, deyək ki, biznesə uyğun olmasını müəyyən edib, ona uyğun olaraq banklara müraciət hazırlasın. Məsələn, belə bir təşviqim də var. Təşəkkür edirəm əvvəlcədən. Çox sağ olun.
I think that's one of the longest questions I've ever heard. Could you just summarise the question very quickly in English for everybody, and then quick answer?
Yeah. Təşəkkür edirəm sualınıza görə, dəyərli iştirakınıza görə qaldırdığınız məsələ çox vacib məsələdir əslində və mən istəyərdim qısa olaraq ingilis dilində bizim qonaqlarımız üçün sizin sualınızı tərcümə edeyim. The question was about the central banks at the moment is working on the terms and the conditions and the general framework for the green financing, appropriate for the green transition, as they call it, and there is a taxonomy also working where they are working on it. And the question was if we are part of the process and what we are doing specifically for this purpose, and if we have our own financial resources to finance the green transition. Deməli, bildiyiniz kimi KOBİ olaraq bizim hər hansı bir maliyyə, müdaxilə instrumentlərimiz yoxdur, alətlərimiz yoxdur. Bəzi ölkələrdə bu var, məsəl üçün KOBİ inkişaf fondları var, hal-hazırda Azərbaycanda o yoxdur. Təbii ki, biz mərkəzi bankın məsələləri üzrə əlaqə deyirik və siz dediyiniz məsələ çox düzgündür, çox vacibdir ki, zaten bizim həm Orxan müəllim bugün danışdığı 2001 siyasətlər prosesində qeyd etdiyiniz məsələ odur ki, kollar böyük şirkətlərdən fərqlənməlidir. Biz buna inanırıq. Və biz istəyirik ki, bu fərqlənmə praktiki nəticələrlə çıxartsın. Və bu praktiki nəticələrdən biri təbii ki, maliyyələşmə çərçivəsidir, maliyyələşmə qaydalarıdır. Eyni zamanda biz başa düşürük ki, Mərkəzi Bankın da özünün hazırlayacağı və ümumi maliyyə sisteminə uyğunlaşacağı bir qaydalar olmalıdır. Və bu asan proses deyil, amma biz Mərkəzi Bankla bundan işləyirik və hətta deyə bilərdik ki, biz Asiya İnkişaf Bankına da bu proseslə cəlb etmişdik və məhz taksonomiyanın inkişaf edilməsi üçün, ümumiyyətlə bu yanaşmanın formalaşdırılması üçün biz Asiya İnkişaf Bankı ilə bərabər bu prosesin tərkibində olmuşuq və bu proses gedir və biz oradakı ekspertlərlə də danışırıq. Yalnız dediyim kimi, yəni bu biraz mən düşünürəm ki, həm vaxt olacaq bir prosesdir. Eyni zamanda bu kollar tərəfindən də müəyyən şəffaflığı, müəyyən korporativ idarə etmənin təkmilləşdirilməsini tələb edir. Çünki maliyyə, bilirsiniz necədir, yəni maliyyələşdirmə belədir ki, burada iş tərəfi var. Maliyyəçi və şirkət. Burada iş tərəfin məqsədləri fərqli ola bilər. Maliyyəçi istəyir ki, verdiyi maliyyə vəsaiti vaxtında şərtlərə uyğun qaytarılsın. Şirkət də istəyər ki, maksimal olaraq bu maliyyədən istifadə edəsin. Bunların, bu prosesin arasında duran vacib bir ölçü, hesabatlıq və şəffaflıq və idarəçilik səviyyəsi. Və bu, təbii ki, iki tərəfin maraqlarında fərqli ola bilər, amma kollar tərəfindən bu, dediyim kimi, şəffaflığın, hesabatlığın tətbiq edilməsi də çox vacibdir. Çünki biz heç bir maliyyə üstünə nə biriniz, nə kimsə başqası məcbur edə bilməz ki, gözü yumulu kiməsə fərqli bir şərtlərdə maliyyə resursu versin. Amma ümumi olaraq demək istəyirəm ki, yəni bu proses siz çox düzgün qeyd edirsiniz, yəni biz də o fikirdəyik ki, kiçik və orta müəssisələrə yanaşma fərqlənməli deyil və əslində bizim danışdığımızın arkasında o fikir durur. Yəni kiçik və orta bu ancaq Azərbaycanı deyil, yeri gəlmişdir demək istəyirəm. Yəni iqlim maliyyələşdirilməsi dünya üzrə klublarla münasibətdə daha az inkişaf edib, nəinki ki, böyük şirkətlərə, əslində də bizim təşəbbüsümüzün arxasında, yəni mən öncədən səsləndirdim, qlobal təşəbbüsün arxasında bu prosesi qlobal səviyyədə yanaşmanın təmin etməsinə yönəlir. Mən düşünürəm ki, qlobal yanaşma olsa, individual ölçülərdə də proseslər asanlaşacaqdır. Yəni yanaşmamız belədir. Təşəkkür ederim.
Okay, thank you very much, Arnold. Thank you for the question. That's all we have time for. Malini, thank you. Thank my panel. I think we can go in a second.
Great, thank you very much, John. And that was actually excellent moderation. It's not your fault that we went 10 minutes into the lunch session, but this was such an important session because it's really, you have provided a clarity about why it is that SMEs are so important. It's why we have created a day specifically to address the many different challenges. And to the gentleman who asked the question about financing structures, because in Azerbaijan, you're beginning to lead on it. You're showing through your own leadership the ways in which a taxation system, the legal system, they're performing to address this challenge. So to that gentleman, please do come back, because the next session, we're going to have a focus on the greening finance transition.